smuggling runs with is busted. He is indicted along with 15 others and sent to Florida for trial.
Rick's defense was, yes, he flew those runs, but he was only doing that in order to gain information about this nasty drug ring for his friends in the government.
Leitchus even convinces his DEA handlers to testify on his behalf.
They all either came down or wrote testimonials to his fine, upstanding character.
But Rick's biggest fear is the Colombians. To convince them that he's not ratting them out, he flies coke runs every weekend during the trial.
Each weekend he'd come home and dropped his lawyers off, hopped in the airplane and went to Colombia and brought a load back.
He'd bring in 200 to 300 kilos of coke, drop them off, get a little bit of sleep, and fly back down to Florida on Sunday to be ready to sit in trial again Monday morning. The trial lasted 11 weeks, and during that time he made 11 flights smuggling cocaine.
Rick makes $13 million flying these drug runs and is the only defendant the jury acquits. But Rick's enormous smuggling success leaves him with millions of dollars to launder. He enlists a corporate Scranton banker, Michael Coffey, to hide the cash offshore.
Michael Coffey helped launder Rick's money by not filling out the proper documentation.
Michael was ambitious, and he made a little extra for providing this service.
But Rick suddenly faces a bigger issue. Jim Cooper is in police custody. He has crashed his plane into the car of a man waiting to offload drugs and killed him.
Everybody says I crashed the airplane on top of this car. And I say, this guy parked his car underneath my airplane. He had done cocaine all day long and was blitzed out of his head, and he and I met in the middle of the runway.
When Cooper is charged with felony murder, his first call is to Rick Leitchus.
Rick had the option of throwing a little money my way. He could have said, look, you need to disappear, go down the islands and get a tan for about 9 months. But he didn't choose that.
Jim was facing up to 20 years in jail, and instead he worked out a plea deal where he didn't get any jail time, and in exchange he provided information about Rick.
Armed with Cooper's confession, the DEA makes its move on Air America and Rick Leitchus.
And the way we did that was what we referred to as following the paper trail. In other words, going after where he'd landed an airplane, finding out there was a gas receipt, where he purchased radio equipment, finding out there was receipts for that.
The feds also bring in a money laundering specialist to examine Rick's bank transactions. Realizing authorities are closing in, Leitchus immediately wires $30 million to the Cayman island of St. Eustatius and flees there himself.
St. Eustatius and a lot of the islands don't have extradition treaties with the United States.
Forensic accountants trace his money to the island, and the DEA appeals to local authorities.
Myself and another agent provided information showing that Rick was wanted back in the United States.
They prevailed upon the government there to deport him as an undesirable alien.
St. Eustatius law enforcement agrees to cooperate. In 1986, Rick is arrested by local police, taken to the airport, and handed over to the DEA.
They got him, put him on a plane, brought him back. When they got into U.S. airspace, they told him he was under arrest.
Rick is charged with conspiracy to smuggle cocaine. To avoid 345 years in jail, he cooperates with the investigation and reveals where he has hidden the cash.
We seized over $21 million in cash and/or assets.
He also gives up his team, all of whom end up serving time. Rick himself goes to jail for 8.5 years.
Rick was a combination of Christopher Columbus and Charles Lindbergh.
Rick wasn't afraid to take a risk. He wasn't afraid to learn about something he knew nothing about.
Compared to anyone else in the drug business, he was a genius.
Bottom line is, he hurt a lot of people. I mean, you bring in 9 tons of cocaine, you're hurting people. You're hurting children, you're hurting families, you're hurting people.
Since his release, Rick Leichus has gone straight and started a new life in Florida.
Last thing I heard, he was living in a place called Smuggler's Cove. Very apropos.
Thank you.